Hello everybody, I am the chess strategist, and this is the second video in my new rapid speedrun. If you haven't checked out the first game, the link is going to be in the card at the end of this video. In our last video, we had a difficult first game where we were losing at a point, but our opponent did end up running out of time and we ended up getting the win. And of course, after every single game, we are going to be breaking down the moves I make, and we're going to go over my mistakes and how to improve. And just to let you guys know, I am rated 1800 on chess.com, so we're going to see how that translates over to Lichess. Let's jump right into it, and we are going to continue with our 10+5 rapid time control. And let's just get into it, guys. Alright, so it looks like we have the black pieces, and we're going to see what our opponent plays. Opponent starts with knight f3, and I like with the symmetrical response, knight f6. Keeping your options open, denying them from playing e4. And we get c4, so it looks like our opponent is going to be playing in English out of a different move order, and they want to deny e5. That makes sense. There's a few different ways we can play this. Personally, one that I'm quite fond of is just playing e6 and then d5, kind of like Queen's Gambit decline style. So e6 is a move here, and it can allow our opponent to transpose back into traditional waters by going back and playing d4, and they do play d4. So here our opponent might want to be playing a Catalan. We got to see. Catalan would be g3 on the next move. We're going to allow them to go into whatever they want in the traditional main lines. We're going to play d5. And our opponent does play a Catalan. There's a few different ways to play the Catalan. One of the ways that I like to do is playing this bishop b4 check, and the idea is you want to make the opponent develop their bishop to this square so that they can't fianchetto it fast. So we're going to give this check. Usually our opponent's block, and then you bring your bishop right back. You can play a5 here, which is a move, but I'm not quite too fond of it, so we're just going to play bishop e7 here. And we force him to develop his bishop to a square that it doesn't really want to go to. Ends up being a small concession. These Catalan positions can be quite restricting. White's going to get this light squared bishop. It's just very powerful. And we're going to have to counteract that pressure eventually. But let's just start by castling. And our opponent will probably castle as well. There's a few options in this position. Let's just say our opponent castles. There's different moves we could make with our c-pawn here. c6 and c5, striking in the center, are options that are worthy of consideration. Personally, I'm always quite fond of maybe a move like knight e4 at the proper moment could come in a very threatening way to our opponents. As well as just b6 and fianchettoing. I don't understand exactly what he wants with this. I mean, he wants to fianchetto, but he could have just done that. c5 might not be good if he decides to put his bishop on this diagonal. I'm going to play b6 here. b6 is strong. It prepares c5. It also prepares us to fianchetto our bishop. He hasn't really tried to add that much pressure to this diagonal, and now we can get our bishop on this diagonal and counteract the pressure. And we're not too worried about White having a strong position here because we've got our bishop that's counteracting his, and the pressure on d5 isn't going to become unbearable. We've got knights, pawn, bishop. We got a lot protecting it. We're not super worried about it. And here I think is a good time to play the move c5 that we've been wanting to play this whole time. c5 is just a good move. It's going to allow us to get this file open, and it's also going to just be a good move generally to make. It's also knight d7. Take. That's fine as well. I just remember I do want to disallow my opponent from playing this move at an opportune moment. I think striking with c5 is probably the move here. Of course, he got this strong pawn in the center that's securing his knight here. We'd like to take this square away from his knight. We want to take away this outpost while we maintain a strong pawn in the center. And he exchanges pawns. And so we'll do the same. And here I'm liking our position. I don't think he was supposed to release the tension that early. And because we played this b6 move, we're going to be able to take with our pawn. We're not going to be left with this weak pawn here. We're going to have two pawns connected, and we're going to be able to play d4 at an opportunity, and I'm liking our position already. Now he's giving us the opportunity to go into a different pawn structure, go into an IQP pawn structure if we'd like. But I'm not too fond of that, so we don't have to do that. I think developing our knight is probably the best move here. Yeah, developing our knight is a sound move. We want to be able to develop our rook. We want our rook on c8 as soon as possible. We're going to want this rook probably on e8. Our queen may come to c7. And this bishop is ready to be redeployed. This bishop is not in a final position here. Now, we could always take and accept the IQP position. But I don't know. Personally, I like the fact that his knight is restricting his bishop. I don't like this nagging pressure this bishop is giving. I don't want to give him any reason to move his knight by taking like this. He gets this strong knight that's on an outposted square, blockading, and he's just getting so much pressure on our pawn, and we don't want any of that. So we're not going to take. We're going to force him to take us and give us the hanging pawn structure, which I'd much rather. And a hanging pawn structure is characterized by pawns on the d file and c file where they're isolated, so there's nothing on e and b. And the hanging pawn structure can be very weak, but it also can be very good for attacking. And our opponent gives us the hanging pawn structure. So we get to take on c5 with our pawn, which is great. Nice. And here our opponent moves his knight in kind of an odd way. He puts his knight on g5, but there's nothing he's really attacking. Doesn't have any real good squares to go to either. If I play h6 here, I don't know where his knight goes. I mean, it could go here. It could go back. This knight isn't really doing much. You could reserve the move h6, or we could play something. I think it's worth sending his knight back to that square. I mean, again, this pressure is not something that's unbearable for us. We have control, but as soon as he starts moving his bishop, the queen, everything's going to start Xing on this one square, and I'd rather not help him improve his position. If he has to put his knight on the corner, now where can his knight go? Can his knight even go here? No. There's no tactic there. There's nothing. Yeah, so his knight has to go back to f3 after h6. And I mean, it could go to, of course, it could go to h3. H3 is nothing wrong with that square per se, except for the fact that it's terrible for the knight. But there's nothing horrible in regards to he's going to lose a knight or something. There's no way to trap it. And he does play that, and he wants to redeploy his knight to f4, which is an interesting move. It does allow him to put more pressure on this d5 pawn. But the thing is, this d5 pawn is not going to be a d5 pawn forever. We are going to eventually exchange we are going to play d4, and we're going to exchange these bishops. These bishops are 100%, I feel like, a favorable exchange for us at this point. And of course, this is the whole zen of the Catalan. It's very, you get a lot of nagging pressure, you get a lot of interesting piece play. Here, though, I feel like we could play knight b6. Knight b6 is an interesting move. I like knight b6. Just reinforcing this. Of course, we are ready to play g5 at any time if the knight arrives on f4. Now that we know that his knight isn't going to arrive on this square, because if he went back like this, we have to protect this square. Right, and now I'm not super worried. Here I think even g5 is a decent move. I mean, his knight is just not good on this square. Where does it go? Here? It can't go there. I like g5 here. Now, of course, you don't usually want to move pawns in front of your king, but here, he doesn't really have a way to exploit it immediately. And I'm not super worried because our kings are castled on the same side. He's not gonna he's gonna attack me on the opposite side of the board using a pawn storm. His king is there too. If he's gonna move his pawns and attack my pawn hook, then he's gonna have to use his pawns. I'm not sure about weakening this diagonal, though. This diagonal can become weak quickly. I'm having a little bit of second thoughts. You know what? I'm going to go with my instincts. We're going to play g5 here. We're going to see where he puts his knight. What I am worried about is him following up with f4. f4 doesn't lead to checkmate or anything. But what we want to do is get in the time to play a move like queen d7 or queen c7 so that we can play d5 or d4. That's our plan, is playing d4. I think queen d7 is a decent move to consider because we don't like the idea of him having the option to take on this square and then reveal the pressure on our queen. Yeah, we don't want pressure on our queen like that. So for the sake of time here, I'm just going to play queen d7 very quickly to move I've more or less calculated and can play without too much thought. It's very clear what it's meant to do. And rooks to c8 and d8 are the plan. Rook on e doesn't really do anything. This pawn is not weak. He does go with f4. Right, so f4 is his idea. Allows him to improve his bishop, for sure, but there's a bunch of different ideas here. Starting with the immediate. Can we calculate this? d5 takes. Okay, so we can just go for d5 here. Do I like here? I like knight. Knight e4. Knight e4 is a strong move here. I'll give you the lowdown. Takes, and he's not going to take because the bishop's protected. This bishop is now revealed here, and we're protecting here twice. And this file is going to be opened. So we're going to have this pawn here, and this knight's going to have to move, and this bishop is going to become a liability. When we start moving our rooks to the center of the board, this bishop is going to be pinned, and he's going to have to put his rooks on some awkward squares. Revealing the pressure of the queen is the main idea of this move. This knight e4 move has always been a move we consider every single turn in this kind of position. It's just a strong move. As we can see here, we are getting low on time. I'm going to have to start moving a little more quickly without too much explanation. The main idea here is counteracting the bishop. Wow, and our opponent plays the intermezzo move, knight to e5, which I don't think is too threatening. I'm not super worried about it. We can just play our own move, queen d6. I don't think too much changes. I don't know where his knight is going per se. Yeah, queen d6 is a fine move here. And what this does do is it makes it so we don't get the tempo anymore. We do have this weak pawn, but it can't be supported. It's not terribly weak. We are able to earn that tempo back with a move like rook d8. He's going to have to make a defensive move or move his bishop into a square. Here he allows us to exchange our bad knight for his good knight. Which I think is just a no-brainer. He's going to take with the rook threatening here, but we can threaten this bishop first. He doesn't have very many options in this position. I think his main option is rook c2. I'm starting to feel we're gaining some control over this position. As you might notice, we do have this weak pawn on c5. Very weak pawn. It's a backward, rook's going to attack it. But our opponent's position or pieces are not in good position. This bishop is becoming a thorn in his side. This is kind of the idea when I played knight to e4 in the beginning. I wanted to open the file and I wanted to allow pressure down the file because his bishop is going to be poorly positioned. And here our opponent calculates a line that I think maybe works. Let's see. Takes, 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 takes. And we exchange with just two rooks left. So it looks like we're just going to go to this rook endgame. Equal rook endgame, it looks like. Takes. He takes first. Makes sense. Yeah, it looks like it's just going to be a draw. He's going to take. I'm going to take. I'm taking their time here. I'm going to allow the repetition. Yeah, it looks like he's going to go for the repetition. He takes with the pawn. Okay. And I'm now going to take, threatening checkmate. We'll see if he goes for the pawn here. I mean, that would be a really foolish mistake to allow back rank mate like that. That would be a kind of interesting conclusion to the game. And we're going to put our rook here just because we disallow any sort of checks. Actually, no, we're going to go back here to make him give us another check. He put his rook on this file to block, which is nice. And I'm going to put my rook here, threaten, of course, taking the pawn, and disallowing any checks like this. Also, there's checks, no checks here because of this rook being weak. We're going to, of course, just advance our pawn. I'm just going to move our rook here. We're going to, our plan is to pin here. He could put his rook here on f7. That would be an interesting move. Looks like he just decided to go for our... Oh, I flagged. Well, I think I was talking a little too much and I flagged, but it's okay. There's still a lot to learn from this game, so let's check and see. We're going to start without the engine. We did go into sort of like a Catalan. Calls it the anti-Nimzo Indian, but this is a Catalan position. Catalan positions D and C pawn, 9 on f3, and g3. That's the Catalan. As you can see, there's a bunch of different grandmasters in this kind of position. Many grandmasters, and our opponent played very well, I have to say. Our opponent is not a new player for sure. So yeah, we got into a Catalan position, and things go pretty swimmingly. Generally, in these Catalan positions, if you're able to put your bishop on the diagonal in the opening, you're pretty happy. And then you play c5, and everything's good. I would say the valuation should be pretty much equal. Yes, valuation slightly better for white, but very slightly. Pretty much equal. Then we trade the pawns in the center. And I'm wondering whether exchanging. Now, this exchange, I was talking about how it was pretty bad in the game, and I didn't make it because I didn't think it was good. And the computer says, yeah, it's not that good for black. It actually gives white a decent sized advantage if black took like that. So I decided not to. Rook e8 was the best move, but I played the second best move, knight b7. And he took. D takes d5. And here the position is really equal. He played this, apparently h6. So knight h3 is actually a good move. Best move by the computer, wow. And it's because of this idea, knight f4. I underestimated this during the game. thinking that it wasn't a super strong idea. It wasn't the greatest move. But we were actually saw that in the game. And I actually played the top engine move too, knight b6. Which I thought was good because it just overprotects this pawn. We want to keep this pawn protected, and that's the whole point of knight f4, is attack this pawn again. He's got 1, 2 points of pressure. He's going to have 3. And we've got 2 defenders, so we need to have more defenders. So with this move, knight b6, we actually add 2 defenders to the pawn. So that pawn is not going anywhere. And we can always advance it to d4 in the case of it becoming too attacked, and it will lose a lot of attackers once it's on d4. Knight b6, knight f4, and rook b8. Rook b8 is an interesting move. Of course, the idea is to prepare d4, because these bishops, something needs to defend this bishop. So during the game, I did play g4, which computer, not g4, g5, sorry, wrong side of the board. I played g5, and computer thinks it's still pretty much equal. It's a very equal-ish position. And rook b8 is still preferred by the computer. Queen d7 isn't as preferred here. And f4 was the engine move. Wow. And so is knight e4. Wowie. No, g4 is even... That's a crazy move. g4? Wow. So computer says g4 and then knight e5. And then queen e6. Yeah. So this is some interesting chess here. I would never think of this myself. We ended up playing the second best move according to computer, knight e4. And our opponent responded with knight e5, which is the best move. And queen e6 would have been better here. Queen d6 gives an advantage for white because of knight b5. Ah, knight b5. Knight b5 would have been a dangerous move. After knight takes e4, pawn takes e4. Our opponent plays knight c4, which gives us back equality. And rook takes c4 is apparently a mistake because of rook d8. Okay? And rook g2 is the only move, but our opponent didn't play that. And this tactic didn't work, and I didn't see it in the game. Wow. This tactic doesn't work because of this, and the intermediate move, bishop f6. Wow. Yeah, I just didn't see. If you just move the bishop out of the way, there's still no way to protect this. Because this rook is now, there's this pawn in the way. There's no way to protect the bishop, and you're just winning a piece. Wow. Granted, this is kind of difficult to see in low time. But here, we just get into a completely equal rook endgame, and it's equal the whole time, right? Yeah, it's equal the rest of the game, and then I flag. Wow. Let's check our accuracy. I'm curious to see how accurate we played. Computer analysis. Yeah, so our opponent played with 90% accuracy. We played with 89% accuracy. One blunder, which was taking like this. Yeah, one blunder is taking the queen. I should have moved my bishop or protected it, and I would have been in a winning position. But yeah, overall we played a pretty solid game. I think 89% accuracy is pretty good, and our opponent flagged us in a rook endgame, which of course happens. But I'm not too disappointed. I feel like I actually had a good time. I don't usually play the Catalan as black from this move order. Usually I end up playing Grunfeld, but our opponent, you know, we wanted to see what he was up to, and we played e6, d5, and I think I played it pretty well. The main ideas, of course, are to eventually play c5 in most queen's pawn positions. You want to play c5. That pawn in d4 just needs to be undermined. It's too strong. and this square, it needs to be controlled. And by eliminating this pawn or weakening this pawn, we're taking away some of white's control of e5, and this knight isn't as powerful, and white has less grip on the center. So yeah, overall, I think that was a pretty good game. I'm satisfied with my performance, and I hope you guys have a good rest of your day. Leave a comment if you'd like to see a longer, shorter, any sort of time control, or you have any ideas that you think would be fun to watch, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. See ya.